I think it may have let me in.
Okay, it's now streaming live. I think we're good, Bryn. I
Perfect.
don't know. So anyway, thank you. Okay. Yeah, okay, thanks. Bye-bye. And then are you able to, yeah, there you go.
It's going to be a little bit funky of a transition, but I think it'll work.
Well, I'm going to start talking and have my video on and start sharing. And so it'll just be a matter of you stopping that share. Right?
Yeah, I should be able to just stop sharing and then you should be fine. I think if you share, try just sharing and I think it'll just boot me out.
Yes, I am able to tell you to stop sharing and do it myself. Okay, great.
Okay, perfect.
I'm going to go on mute for a little bit, Ted.
Okay.
Ted, can you just say test, test? We'll hear what it sounds like.
Test, test. Check, check.
Okay, 1 second. Can you do that again?
1, 2, 1, 2. Test,
Okay,
test. Check, check.
great. That's it. Thanks. All right, Ted, why don't you go ahead and go live on YouTube?
I think you're clear to share.
Yep, thanks. Good evening, everyone in the room, and good evening, everyone online. This is the second open house for the City of Lakewood, Washington's 2024 Comprehensive Plan Amendment process. This is something that has been actually being worked on by the city for over a year now, but we're getting to the point where it's going to, become a public document for people to be able to review, to read, and make comments on. That'll start to happen at our Planning Commission this spring. But one of the things we wanted to make sure everybody was aware of ahead of time, really understand and be ready to ask questions, is regarding some of the changes that will happen for housing. And so that's where we're going to focus our time tonight. But there are a number of other issues that are being reviewed as part of this process. And so you'll see some other topics come up if you do sign up for for updates. If you go to our website about this, if you come to the hearings, housing is one piece of it, but there are other items as well that we'll be talking about. So again, for those of you online, the way we're going to do this tonight, I'm going to make a presentation that should last only about 15 to 20 minutes. And then we're going to open it up to questions for those in the room here with me and also those that are online. So the chat is not open, but Q&A is open. So if you would like to type a question in while we're doing this presentation, we'll get to that as soon as the formal part of this is done and we get into the dialogue. So with that, I'm going to begin to share my screen and we'll just start to walk through some of this detail. One more thing for those who are just getting here, the restroom is just to the inside there. There's refreshments in the back corner as well. Oop. We'll get it, hang on. All right, so as I mentioned, my name is Tiffany Spear. If I didn't mention that, I'm Tiffany Spear, and I am the Long Range and Strategic Planning Manager with the City of Lakewood. With me tonight is Chris Davis. He is one of the people that's helping me out with this process, but I'm the lead staff person working with the public, working with our steering committees that are helping us out with this process. And so if you have questions either tonight or after this evening, if you want to chew on it, think about it, and ask questions later, you're welcome to contact either one of us, and we'll be getting back to you as soon as we can. So really quickly, just some basic information about the City of Lakewood in case you're a newbie to town or just this is information you might not know. The city is about 63, almost 64,000 people now. There is about 52% of the population that is non-white, meaning BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So we are one of 15 cities in the state where that's the case. There is a little over 26,000 housing units in the city, and a housing unit can be anything from an apartment to a single family McMansion. So just a unit is a very general term for any type of housing. Lakewood is somewhat unusual because instead of having kind of a 60% homeowner, 40% renter ratio, which is what a lot of jurisdictions or governments usually do, Lakewood is opposite to that. We actually have more renters than homeowners in town. The median income, and median is half people make more than this number, half make less. That median number for Lakewood is about 65,500. That's 20% or so below Pierce County. So the county as a whole, about 80,000, we're at about 65. The employment rate at this point, and that includes everybody, so from babies to seniors, but the employment rate here is about 55%. And we have a population of below poverty level at 12.7, almost 13% of the city. One thing that's really important when you start to talk about land use and planning and where growth of housing or jobs can happen over time is that Lakewood does not own its sewer, its water, or its power. And what that means is when you as a homeowner need either repair or maintenance, or if you're trying to build something, you're not just talking to the city to get permits. You're talking to, for instance, Pierce County to deal with sewer approval, with Lakewood Water District for your water approval. And then there's actually 3 different power utilities in the city: PSE, Tacoma Power, and Lakewood Light and Power. So it's a little more complicated than, for instance, if you lived and were trying to build in Tacoma, where the city controls all of that. And it's kind of a one-stop shop. We do our best to coordinate, but you as a homeowner or a property owner would be dealing with multiple entities if you were to pursue any sort of the housing options we're going to talk about tonight. So what are we doing with this 10-year plan? This is a 10-year process, as I mentioned. The Washington State legislature has adopted laws that say, City of Lakewood, in our case, you have to do a process every 10 years where you look at how you are planning for people, for how your land is used, for where jobs are going to go, for where your parks are going to be, for perhaps your police force, all of those types of things, the whole gamut. You have to review that at least every 10 years and make sure that it is consistent with state law, consistent with some things that we have to comply with regionally and also county-wide. So it's if you look up there, it's kind of a rainbow or a layer there of all these different rules that by the time you get down to where it says comprehensive plan, that is what we're talking about in the city of Lakewood. Those ones that are above, those are things that are adopted by other entities, either an agency or at the very top, the state legislature. And again, Lakewood has to comply with all of those layers. So what is a comprehensive plan? It is something that is good for a 20-year horizon. So what we're doing in 2024, we're looking to plan ahead until the year 2044. 5 years from now, we're going to do a check-in with the state, and another 10 years from now, we're going to do this process again. So again, this is the 24 process. There's going to be a 34 process and on, and there's this rolling 20-year horizon, what the city is planning for. And again, there has to be consistency with those regional as well as those statewide rules. But at the same time, this is supposed to be something that reflects the community, its priorities, its vision for the city of Lakewood. And certainly since the city incorporated in 1996, it's only about 27 years old as a city, there has been a vision in place as to what people who voted to incorporate as a city wanted to see happen. How much of that has happened kind of changes based on the subject, but those are still some of the foundations for this plan. And then there's other things where as times have changed, priorities maybe have changed. And so this plan is going to get updated to reflect some of that as well. The vision statement itself, what you'll see there is at its 30-year anniversary, which is coming up in a couple of years, the city council, which reflects a process in 2015 where the whole general public was pulled out and asked these questions. What do you see as priorities? What do you want to have as your vision? And then the city council adopted it, making sure Lakewood keeps in its mind its history, known for safe and attractive neighborhoods, a vibrant downtown with arts and cultural communities as well, that there is robust economic growth and job creation here in the city, that we have excellent public and private schools, that the lakes, parks, and natural environment are protected and celebrated, that there is excellence in municipal service delivery, that we are embracing diversity, and that certainly the city and its programs and its staff, quite frankly, are also all supportive of Joint Base Lewis McChord, the Camp Murray as well, service members and their families. Yes. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Thank you. Is that working? Can you check? I'm sorry, everyone. Yes, okay, all right. Apologies, everybody, and apologies to those online. This will be recorded and you'll be able to see all of these slides. So community values, which also informed the vision and accompany the vision, is that Lakewood is a friendly and welcoming community, high quality public services, vibrant connected community places, a strong local economy, and sustainable and responsible practices related to the environment. There are land use zones, and this is the online picture, you can see it, but it's also in hard copy if you want to look at it later. There's all these colors on the map of the city, and these are the land use zones. And within each color, there are certain uses allowed. So the bright yellow, which is most of the land acreage that you can see, that is where it's a residential zone. It's where people are living for the most part. But you'll see, for instance, the red, that is the downtown that's been identified now over the last few years. And that area that's kind of the hatch mark, kind of weird triangle off to the right of the red, that is the station district down by the sounder station. That's also an area where we're concentrating on some of the planning. And then you'll see the darker blue areas. Those are, for instance, the Western State Hospital, Clover Park Technical College, the St. Clair Hospital, other public types of uses. And then the green, those are, we're sitting right now in Fort Steilacoom Park. So that's our parks and open spaces. On the right-hand side or the far east side of the city map, you'll see kind of in a vertical line right above where you have all the colors and telling you what they mean. That is the area that's affected by the flight patterns of Joint Base Lewis McChord. And so there are specific uses that are allowed or not allowed in that part of the city. So what are we doing in 2024? First of all, we're going to reorganize our comprehensive plan. So for those of you who maybe really want to get into it and actually read the document, it's available now, but it's going to significantly change. We're going to reflect what, again, has happened with state law, but hopefully it's going to become more readable where you can see here's the vision, like I just mentioned, here's the goals for each ones of these types of land use, and here are the policies that the city has adopted to try to implement the goal. Excuse me. So what are we also going to be looking at? Growth targets is what they're called. And it is between now and 2044, how many people should the city be planning for? How many housing units should the city plan for? And how many jobs? And so, go ahead. No, that's the table of contents. You're welcome. Okay, so we're going to be looking at those growth targets, and they come from the state down to Pierce County. Pierce County talks to all of the cities and figures out how much growth each city is going to plan for. So we now have our numbers for the city of Lakewood. The other thing we're going to be looking at, though, is transportation. There's going to be some changes needed to capital facilities. So that could be a park. Are there improvements that are needed for the park? And then also looking at some climate change requirements that the state has now imposed. So starting to focus in on housing, statewide, so this is everywhere, there's about 1.1 million new homes. I'm sorry, I went too far. 1.1 new homes needed in the next 20 years statewide. And then out of those, some of them are needing to be planned for emergency housing. So those that for whatever reason don't have stable housing at the moment. If you jump now to the Lakewood specific numbers, this is where we're going to spend a lot of the rest of our time tonight. 9,378 is our number. So between now and 2044, the idea is the city is going to plan for that many new housing units. And then in terms of the emergency housing, we are supposed to be planning for 574. So I'm going to step back a little bit because I keep saying the city has to plan for, the city has to plan for. What does that mean? That is not the city coming to you and saying, property owner, you have to do this. That is the city saying, our rules, our zoning says you can do this. Okay, so when I'm saying that the city is planning something, it's not we're coming to buy property, it's not we're requiring property owners to do something. It is these are now options that the city business owners and property owners and residents will have. Does that make sense? Yeah. This is about 2.5 per housing unit is the rough estimate. The other thing you'll see on this chart, and I understand for some of you in the back of the room, this is a little harder to see, but again, you'll be able to access this online as well, is broken out this 9378 number into different economic brackets. And the new rule from the state as well is that not only do you have to plan for this total number of people, but you have to say this many are going to be affordable to people that make only 30% of the area median income. These have to be affordable for those that make up to 50%, up to 80%, up to 100% or more. So now the city is responsible to make sure that its rules allow people who are building housing to have them be affordable for people who are going to be at those making that amount of money, rather than just saying, well, we're planning for it and it happens to all come in as those McMansions again, that we did our job. This is now the state telling the city it has to be affordable for everybody, at least some of your housing units. The other thing I wanted to point out regarding these numbers is that I mentioned the downtown and the Station District area. Those are two spots where the city has said we're going to put a lot of our future growth into, in part to recognize that those are where it's easier to do that, but also there's available land right now. And then the existing neighborhoods, the existing commercial areas, they're built out, meaning there's maybe not a lot of room to stretch and grow. So we're going to put more people and more jobs in particular areas of the city. And so the two middle columns, this one right here, can you see me do that? No, you can't. Okay. The middle column is talking about a quarter of the housing is planned for right downtown. Another 20% is over by the sounder station. And then the rest of it will be just scattered throughout all of the residential areas of the city. That's the idea. In terms of jobs, again, quite a bit of it, almost 3/4 of them would go into the downtown, about 13% in the station area, and then the rest again scattered around the city. So middle housing, this is one of the things that you'll see on the handout as well that everybody has. This is the type of housing now that the state is requiring us to allow as a city. And the term is middle housing, but what does that mean? That could be a duplex, a triplex, up to sixplex, and then also townhouses, stacked flats, apartments, and cottage housing. So these are the types of things that really haven't been very popular in Lakewood or a number of other cities around the Puget Sound for a while in terms of what's been built. And what the state legislature has decided is that this is what they want to make sure we can plan for and allow, because single family homes is out of the price range for a lot of folks now. Want to make sure that there are housing units again that are more affordable for people. And then at the same time, there's apartments, but maybe people want something in between. Maybe they want to move down to a condo. Maybe they're an empty nester and they don't need the big yard anymore. Whatever the reason is, there needs to be more housing choice. So that's the idea behind middle housing. What the rules are changing to say is that once all of this gets adopted by our city council, which will be by the end of this year, we're going to be in our single family areas. So where traditionally it's been one house on a lot, the homeowner or property owner will be able to start looking at 2 housing units on top of, not on top of literally, but in addition to the single family house. So you could have up to 3 housing units on a single lot in a single family area. If you are within a quarter mile of what they're calling a major transit stop, so for instance, the Sounder Station, the Pierce Transit Hub in downtown, that number goes from 2 to 4. So the idea is these housing units that are smaller, that are allowing more per lot, there's even more of them where you are close to a bus or a train. That's the idea. Just some ideas, some glances at what is a duplex, fourplex, all the way to a townhouse. I think most of us have seen something like this somewhere in our lives. And then accessory dwelling units, they're actually part of the middle housing definition, but they are talked about in state law on their own. And you can think of this as the classic mother-in-law apartment over the garage, or somebody that's converted their attic into a rental space or what have you. The way the rules now are required for the city is that you can do 2 of these on a single family lot again. So you've got the main house and you can do 2 ADUs. They can be part of the main house. They can be attached to it with a separate entrance, or they can be a detached unit on the lot. So there's different combinations that state law will require us to allow. Just some examples you've seen. Again, I am assuming this in your lives, but here's a detached on the top one, the top left. That peaked roof is an accessory dwelling unit above the garage. And then on the right bottom side, you'll see that pink door. That is inside the main house, but it is its own dwelling unit with its own kitchen, bathroom, etc. So here we are tonight talking about this. How is this going to affect you? No, you do not have to do this. I wanted to make that really clear. When we did our November open house, there was a lot of confusion, first of all, because of technical issues. So I'm really happy we're working tonight. But secondly, there were a lot of questions about, do we have to do this or not? The answer is no. The people that have to do it are the city. We have to change our rules, but you as a property owner, as a homeowner, it is up to you to decide whether you want to do this or not. Hopefully that helps allay some fears. And when do the rules go into effect? As I said, the council's going to take action on this by the end of the year. So 2025 is when this will go into effect. I think we don't need to go with that. So just really quick, I'm not going to go into too much horrendous detail here, but again, this map is showing where these new rules are going to apply. And what you'll see is the bright yellow, that's where it will be the 2 units. The orange, and I should do this anyway. This kind of U shape, if you look at the dotted lines, the orange spots in there, that's where it would be the 4 units because it's closer to what is a planned bus rapid transit route. And then down here, we've got some areas that are going to be close to the sounder station. And then down in Tillicum, actually, there's a spot because there is a planned major transit stop down there as well. So again, all of this up here, this is kind of the 2 units per lot. This is the 4 units per lot. And then you've got some other spots in the city. Yeah. In addition to, correct. Yes. Please. That is the minimum. So if you want to be talking more units than that on your lot, then it'll be a matter of coming to the city council during this hearing process to say, with a bigger lot, we should be allowed to do more than that. There's not square footage limitations on the big side. The limitation is on how small your lot can be to do this, and it has to be at least 1,000 square feet. So obviously 2 acres, you've got plenty of room. Sure. Are you talking about adult family homes? Yes, adult family homes are allowed in the city, and I know for some, particularly in the Oak Brook area, that there are many in that area because of the houses size and everything that are there. Those cannot turn into these accessory dwelling units, and or if they can't add the accessory dwelling units or the middle housing. They are a non-residential situation in that case, and they're not going to be adding these additional units there. Okay. This map is also available in hard copy somewhere, but what I wanted to point out here, and one of the things that the city is grappling with, and we would love to get input from all of you when we get into our public hearings, is these red lines. Those are streets that are narrower than our Public Works Department says is safe to allow on-street parking. So if we go back, let's go back. The rule is now these areas, which are now in blue, sorry for the change in the colors, but these blue areas here, and then within this hatch marked area here and here, that's where we've got more units per lot going to be allowed. However, we are also looking at rules in some cases where the city cannot say, okay, you want to do that? You have to add sufficient parking on the site for however many units you're going to build. There's parts of the city where the city will be able to do that. There's other parts where it won't. And so we're trying to track where these narrower streets are. What is the city going to do about parking? Because right now the thought behind all of this is you're in this big area, the U, or you're down in Tillicum where I was talking about, you're close enough to transit that you're going to walk to it, presumably. Realistically, how many people will actually do that, we can't predict, but I think we all have an idea in our minds. And so how do we get these people there if they don't have a car? And all of this area over here, there is no major transit stop. So how far do these people how far are they expected to walk before they get to a bus or a train station, whatever? So the city is trying to figure out what to do with parking in the residential areas. And that is something that we would hope that we can get some feedback from you. The thought is maybe we allow it somehow, and that might mean repainting your residential street if it doesn't get physically wider to where, like, on one side there would be parking. It could be permits. People pay for parking permits like you see in other areas. And it could be there is a fee that anyone that is building an ADU might have to pay to go into a pot, and then we figure out parking as a larger group. So that's one of the things that we're really seeking some feedback on. That's basically what I'm talking about. Mhm. If you're talking about actually putting in an apartment building, that's beyond the middle housing stuff we're talking about. And in the city code, yes, if you have that type of impact on not only parking, but on transportation, trips to and from that apartment building, that all gets analyzed, and a builder or developer is required to improve in front of their property. If there's new turn lanes required, if there's new intersections that have to be built, all of that is required in code. Yes. There are grocery stores in certain parts of the city based on our land use zoning. This is really just talking about housing right now, but part of what we're doing in our big 20 or 10-year plan is talking about the term of art is food deserts, but basically where do people go for a grocery store? Yes. And that's something that in Tillicum and Woodbrook we're working on right now. And then Springbrook at some point, we're going to probably do one of those little sub area plans and talk about it for there as well. So this is just coming toward the end of this now. We've got a timeline here for you. We're in the open housing and public outreach process. May 1 is when you're going to start to see the official time to tell the city council and our planning commission what you think. And we really do hope that you do that. June 26th is when the planning commission is supposed to finish up its work. And then the big public hearing at the city council is July 15th. So again, an opportunity to provide your feedback there if you haven't already. The idea is that all of this work gets done by September, and then in 2025, these new rules apply. Where can you find out more information? Where can you sign up for additional feedback and updates from the city? These two websites, and it's also on the sheet at the very top, you'll see the website. If you go there, you can sign up for regular updates, and we send those out several times a month at this point, just to let you know what's going on. And then if you happen to be part of a group, part of whether it's a church group or a chamber or a Rotary or just a community organization, and you want us to come and talk to your group, we're happy to do that. So again, contact us through that website and let us know, and we'll bring the information to the group that you may be part of. With that, we're going to start our even more questions and answers. So those of you that are online, we're going to look at your questions in the Q&A. Sorry, 1 second. And then also we'll take some questions here in the room. So Ted, hang on 1 second. Yes. Uh-huh. There's 2 different websites. So where you look. Oh, I see which I see. Yes. Yes, I apologize, everybody. Okay, so at the very top, you see the website address. My apologies, my sincere apologies. It's .us, and then before the number 24, that should be a slash. That dot right before the 24 should be a slash. I apologize. Thank you. Sure. Is that what you're looking for? Oh, okay, sure. So Ben H at Burke Consulting, and then the phone number is there as well. Is that what you needed? Okay, you're welcome. All right, any other questions here in the room? Yes.
Tiffany?
At this point, the HOA wins. Okay. And so for those of you who maybe didn't hear that online, the question was, what happens if you have an HOA over your property that says only so many units per acre, for instance? At this point, state law does not trump that. However, the state legislature is talking about that. So as of now, if you have an HOA that says only so many units, blah, 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 that is going to control. Yeah, go ahead. Yep. The question was whether and how the city's comprehensive plan coordinates with the counties and whether the city is going to allow co-op buildings. So the answer for the first question is we work very closely with Pierce County in its planning. And when I mentioned at the very first, we have to follow countywide rules. That's part of that. So Pierce County doesn't control the land use in the city. Lakewood says this is where houses go, this is where buildings go, and this is the type of things we're going to allow. But Pierce County does the sewer. So if you're trying to pull a permit, you have to talk to them. And obviously we are inside of Pierce County. So the planning is consistent is the term that we use between the two jurisdictions. In terms of co-ops, we're still in the planning talking phases. So that would be a request that we can take back and consider. There's a question. Yeah. One second. Oops. I don't think we are. No, Lakewood is not. Okay. There was a question whether Lakewood is a sanctuary city, and the answer is no. Sorry. No, no. This is, if you want to do it, this is going to allow you to do it. The have to in this whole process is for the city. This is a choice coming to landowners. Okay, you're welcome. Yeah, let's see, right back here. Go ahead. Yeah, yeah. That's one of the things. There's a question in the room about tree canopy, tree cover, and whether you add more housing units or you deal with keeping trees and preserving trees. That is one of the things we're struggling with. And that's, again, something that we hope we get public feedback about. Because under the state law that the city is having to follow, tree coverage and climate change and natural environment is supposed to be just as important as housing. And so we're at this competing, what's going to govern on your lot, right? And the city is trying to, at this point, launch an urban forestry program where we would actually increase the number of trees in the city. So we're trying to figure out where and how many units we're going to allow of housing or commercial construction, while at the same time preserving and encouraging tree coverage. So that you're absolutely right. You hit it on the nose. That's an issue we need to talk about more. Yeah, go ahead. Sure. Yeah. No, no. What we're talking about when I started, if you remember, with so many units need to be affordable for people making all these different amounts. First of all, it's pretty much accepted fact that the private market, whether it's you on your own property or a private developer, anything that would be charging less than 80% of what people make, those that make less than that, that has to be done by an affordable housing provider with government grants. That type of housing is something that'll probably be taken care of by whether it's Rescue Mission, or in our city we have LASA, or some other housing developer. They will do that. We are not going to be coming to you as a city and saying, you on your property with your accessory dwelling unit have to make this affordable at X amount. That's not going to happen. The city of Lakewood will not do any rent control unless and until it's told it has to. Right. And if we have to follow it, we have to follow it as a city. But at this point, there are no plans for rent control. I couldn't predict. I don't know if you've heard anything, Dave. Sorry. Well, we can be honest with you and tell you that we'll do it if we have to. Okay. And the message to be delivered is to the legislature because they're making the choice. Yep. Yeah, go ahead. You're talking about the renter's property rights, if I'm remembering how it was phrased. What we're trying to do really is work on preserving existing affordable housing with our rental housing safety program. And some of you may be aware of this program. It's been around since 2017. The city has inspectors that goes to all of the rental properties in the city to make sure they're habitable and safe. And the idea is to keep them standing, keep them operating as long as possible, because that is more affordable than something having to get torn down, rebuild, and you got a more expensive building equals higher rent. The other thing that the city has been doing for the last couple of years is working with Tacoma Pro Bono, who provide for city residents eviction protection and help when something, if they're about to be evicted or they just have been, trying to give them assistance to get them back into housing. That's the answer I can give you tonight. Okay. I see. I see. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yep. And that is an issue, unfortunately, that people and governments across the state are going to be facing, is what we're thinking, is that you will have the good actors out there, property owners that are good actors, renters that are good actors, and all as well. You may have an issue where if someone intends to do it or not, they move into a middle housing unit or an ADU on your property, and something goes sideways and they're there, but they're not paying, right? What happens then? And it's not you're in an apartment unit, yet you're in somebody's yard. And we're not sure yet. We don't know what the answer is going to be. And I know that that's not the best answer. Yeah, go ahead. Short-term rentals actually are already governed in our city code. There are rules that need to be followed. But what's happening now that we're talking about all these new units on a lot potentially is the city council is looking at whether or not short-term rentals will even be allowed in an accessory dwelling unit. Because the idea behind what we're having to do right now as a city from the state legislature is people need a place to live. They need to be more affordable. So we're going to let or even require a city to plan for more housing units on a particular acre of land, right? You don't have to buy the land, you build another unit and it's more affordable. That is not the same as an economic development tool, you can now have a short-term rental on your property, right? Because a short-term rental by definition is not something where people are moving in to live as a more affordable unit. And so the question that came briefly before our council last fall, they decided to hold off until this year and talk about it as part of this bigger package. So if you are someone, whether you're pro or against having short-term rentals, Airbnb type of things in these units, the city council needs to hear from you. That's a question they want to know about. Yeah. That won't be allowed. Under this new housing scheme, this is something that the city has to allow. And so if it's the type of housing which goes up to those townhomes and courtyard apartments and condos are probably the highest density we're talking per lot or per acre, there is not a neighborhood coming up and saying no to that. It is state law is saying we have to allow it as a city. Having said that, there will be rules that they have to follow, including notification that something's happening if it's a larger project. But the city will not be able to just tell somebody no if next door neighbor says we don't want it, because this is a new change that we have to follow. Sure. This was done by our state legislature over the last 2 years. And this is not something that any of you, when you voted them into office, probably were thinking about, nor were they. This is something that just happened in 2023. And the rules are what the rules are now that we are trying to prepare for as a city. So if you are unhappy about this, state legislature. I know that's not the best answer, but that's the people that made the decision. I'm going to go ahead and let our people online start to ask questions. So Ted, if you could start going through the Q&A of things that haven't been answered yet.
Sure. And just for posterity, if we take more questions in person, can you just repeat the question for online so they can hear the
Yes,
question?
I understand you guys probably couldn't hear most of that. I apologize.
Okay, let me get to the beginning here. Okay. Does HOA, like current HOA standards supersede the bill changes? So if like an HOA doesn't allow for it, then how does that work?
Yes, that is the case as of right now. So as long as it is not a historically racist covenant, and I know that in parts of Lakewood, there were some that said, if you are not white, you can't live in this property unless you're the chauffeur. Literally, it said that. Those things are illegal. And if that's what people are trying to rely on, no, that's not going to control. However, if you have a covenant or a restriction on a property in an HOA that says this property only can have one house on it, period, regardless of the lot size or what have you, that is going to control. However, the state legislature might change that rule in the next year or so. So please stay tuned. Go ahead.
Okay. Will tiny houses be allowed?
Tiny houses will be allowed. That will be one of the options. Yes.
And I'm guessing those are either similar or the same as ADUs, or is there a specific separation there?
Well, they would fall within an ADU. The ADU is a very general term, meaning it's not the original house on a property. That's about the best way to describe it.
Okay. And I think this is similar to the HOA question. What about existing neighborhood bylaws that were set in place when the neighborhood was platted?
Yep, same answer.
Okay. Why does the preferred middle housing stop at a sixplex if you have room for, 9, 10, 11 units, that sort of thing within the quarter-mile zone?
Because what we're talking about is what fits on a single lot. We're not talking about the number of units per acre. We're talking about in an established neighborhood, somebody deciding they want to put more units on their property. And the idea is these are properties probably not big enough for that type of development, as well as there are other parts of the city where that is already zoned. That is where those types of larger, more dense things are going to go.
And just for clarity's sake, there are zones that do allow for greater density, and they still will allow for those densities.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. There's kind of two questions here. They're a little bit more in depth. We may need to reach out to this person specifically. But
Okay.
you mentioned the middle housing and ADUs interchangeably. For ADUs, there's typically a square footage maximum per unit. Does the density increase per lot allow for an actual multifamily duplex, triplex, or fourplex versus the addition of square footage capped ADUs?
We'll have to get back to them on that one.
Okay. Yeah, we will. This is, let's see who this was. This was John Rodriguez. If we could
Okay.
exchange information, I'll get back to you specifically on that. And then also your other question, because this is also fairly in depth.
Okay.
There have been a couple of questions just generally. How will this affect property taxes?
And that is something that we are also waiting to see. The question is based on, you all know this, your tax, if you're a homeowner, you've got your parcel and it's assessed every year by the assessor treasurer. Right now, the land use allowed is one house, right? If you can suddenly start to do more units, what is that going to mean to your tax value? We don't know the answer yet. Have you heard anything? Okay, so your housing tax assessment wouldn't go up until there was another unit on it? Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Ted.
Okay. Do, 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 do. I believe this is similar to the HOA question again, so we'll go past it. Yeah, I think that is it.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. How will this affect other levies like fire and, oh, that's another, yeah, taxes again, same answer.
Yeah, yeah, we're trying to figure it out and we'll get back to you one-on-one if that's all right.
Yeah. Oh, here's one. Can we plan for a second ADU prior to 2025?
You can plan for it, but the permits will not be accepted or reviewed. This is something where the rules are getting talked about right now, but they're not in place.
Okay. Can lots be divided and then the new build sold separate?
Lots can be divided if they are of a certain size. If they're too small, then no. If they're big enough, then yes, they can be split. And if that's the case, you have a new lot where you could be building, yes. It depends on the zone. So yeah, if it's an R2, it's going to be 4,500 square feet, maybe. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, yes. It's very complicated. It's not easy, and I understand your frustration. Any more, Ted?
Ready for another? Okay. Can you discuss the parking requirement offsite that the city is leaning towards?
We're not leaning toward anything at this point. The city staff, when we first started looking at where, whether it's because the roads are really narrow or just the way the houses are laid out and where we saw potential for parking on site versus on a street, the city staff went to our planning commission last fall and said, the city needs to maybe look at changing its policy, figuring out how to allow on-street parking. Because otherwise, if you don't have this regulated and handled, it's going to be chaos in a worst case situation where if you do have a short-term rental in an accessory dwelling unit in the middle of a neighborhood and you have a party short-term rental, what happens to the people around that? Or if you have someone who has a lot large enough to put 2 or 3 additional units, where are all those cars going to go? That went to the planning commission. The planning commission then made a recommendation to the city council that the short-term rentals continue to be allowed as part of all of this accessory dwelling unit development, meaning parking needed to be dealt with. And the city council said, okay, we hear that. We're interested in continuing to talk about this. And what we need to do is figure out, do we need to change where Lakewood has been for the last 27 years and say, yes, we are now going to allow people to park on the street in neighborhoods. And so that question is very much in play right now. And that is something that the city council is hoping to hear from people about. Any more, Ted?
I am not
1 second.
seeing any more. Oh, one more. How is this going to affect our air quality? Currently, our air is poor, and this is going to increase even poorer air for the community.
The air quality is one reason why this is being allowed from the state legislature's point of view, because what they're doing is having more people living in these denser areas and walking. That is the theory, or biking to a bus or to a train. Whether you believe it or not, I understand the frustration, but that is the thought process, that we are getting to the point where people are not driving as much cars, and as a result, the air quality improves. The other piece, as I talked about before, was we're also looking at, for instance, increasing the number of trees in the city. That's something that there are parts of the city where there are very few. Springbrook, Lakeview, Tillicum, Woodbrook, other parts of the city. And by adding that additional tree canopy, the hope is that that will actually help with air quality as well. Any more, Ted?
I believe that's it.
Okay, so we're going to come back into the room. Thanks for your patience. Go ahead. The question was whether the current setback requirements on lots will stay in place. If what they do means you can't do at least 2 units or at least 4 units that state law says we have to allow, yes, they will change. If you are going to be able on your lot to fit what you're looking to do, assuming you want to do it, without having to change the setbacks, they will stay the same. But if the lot is not big enough to keep those setbacks and still let those housing units be built, they will change. Yes, yes, it'll be in the code. Sir. Sure. The rules will be analyzed and the regulations will be analyzed along with these changes to code on zoning. And really quick online, the question was, if over time these additional units are built and there's that many more cars, if people don't actually start walking and biking everywhere as thought by the legislature when they adopted this, what happens with transportation and the rules for developers and builders? Those will be analyzed. However, again, there's been limits on what the city can say and the city can do. So we will do what we can, but that's the best answer I can give you. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions? Go ahead. Uh, yeah. If I'm understanding the question correctly, the question was about whether the city is planning for having enough staff to handle increased permitting requirement or permit demand, I should say. Is that an accurate summary? Okay. Right now, the city has a system where the amount of permit revenue that comes in, so people pay fees for permits, and it pays for up to 85% of that department's staff. If we start to get additional demand and additional permits required or permits requested, there will be more revenue and there will be the ability to hire more staff. But other than that, the way it sits right now, we're trying to adjust with online permitting systems, trying to become more efficient with our current resources. As time goes by, if we suddenly have this influx, that'll be a matter for the city council to deal with in their budget. Please. Yeah. Yeah, question in the back. Yes, for affordable housing developers. The question was whether there would be grants or incentives from the federal, state, or local level for people wanting to build affordable housing. I don't know that there will be incentives for individual homeowners or individual parcel owners. There are grants and there are programs now that the state and the county both have, but they are toward those developers of multiple units on multiple parcels. All right, any other questions in the room? Yeah. I cannot say it will definitely go up. The thought is it probably will. That decision is up to the assessor, treasurer, and the state legislature, their tax scheme that they're going to adopt. What people are thinking right now is that if a lot will allow for multiple units, but they're not built on it yet, that's one scenario. If you've actually built additional units on the lot, yes, your tax valuation will go up. So it's still very murky. Any other questions online, Ted? He's muted.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is Lakewood going to put together an architectural board to determine if the design is tasteful and acceptable, or are we just going to allow anything to be built?
There is discussion about everything from pre-approved plans, like some jurisdictions have already adopted. If you want to do an ADU and you want to get through the permit review process faster, here's some samples you can pick from. These have already been approved. The design has already been looked at, and that's something Lakewood might do. We haven't decided anything like that yet. At this point, there are no plans for an architectural board. And the way the state law reads, we cannot do anything that is more restrictive or harder to get through the hoops, if you will, than somebody building just a single family house. None of this can be made more difficult by the regulations the city adopts. You're muted, Ted, if you're talking.
Yep. Does a bus stop count as a transit stop for the purposes of this?
A single bus stop is not a major transit stop. A major transit stop is something like the Sounder Station or a bus rapid transit route stop or the center in Town Center for Pierce Transit. So it has a certain number of trips or a certain number of people accessing it in a day. And that's the result that we were able to show on that map, where there's 2 or 3 spots in the city where that stop is located, and then you look to a quarter mile from that to figure out how many units per lot will be allowed.
Okay,
Any more, Ted?
that's it for online until some more roll in. Oh, might have just got one. Let's see.
Yeah.
Would this affect developments like the one on Gravelly and Veterans, where they did a bunch of McMansions, where they would have now been able to have more units?
If it is a project that is either underway getting built or is now built, it was built under the rules in effect at the time. These rules go into effect starting 2025, and once they are in place, they will apply in those areas of the city where it's been single family in the past, and that's what the zone allows. And if anybody that owns any of those parcels wants to look at taking advantage of these new choices, they will be able to, just like anybody else in the city. All right, last call. Any other questions in here? Sure. Okay. That's actually part of what we've been talking about. So the question was about whether there are going to be any new train stations or stops within the city of Lakewood. And I think you're referring to the Sound Transit. Yeah, there was a vote a few years ago by the state or by the Pierce or Puget Sound area to bring additional train trips, light rail or sound or full heavyweight trains through this part of this county and then further south. What you saw in Tillicum, the reason you see that we're having to start to talk about adding additional units per lot there is because by 2045, there's supposed to be a new train station there. Okay, okay. But I bring that up because yeah, but that's the answer to your question is yes, there are areas of this city where there's supposed to be additional train access. It's just not going to be for a while. And it just depends on revenue coming into the transit agency to be able to build, etc. Yeah. Yes. Yes. And we actually have a project that we hope will be breaking ground within the next 6 months to a year. If everybody knows the empty parking lot behind the Barnes and Noble, that's going to become a mixed use project, meaning there will be commercial or retail and then housing on top of that. All right. Well, you're welcome to stay longer if you wish. There's some more information out here. We're happy to answer questions. If there's anything else online, thank you very much for being here. We will follow up with individual responses to those we couldn't answer tonight. And I will thank you all very much for attending.